I need you to take in what happened only moments ago, not as rumor or exaggeration, but as a sequence of events witnessed by many people at a busy intersection that suddenly turned into chaos. One moment the street had been ordinary, with traffic moving steadily and people going about their routines, unaware that within seconds everything would change. Then came a sharp sound of impact, metal against metal, followed by a sudden wave of confusion that spread faster than anyone could process. People froze for a fraction of a second before instinct took over and the street erupted into motion, bodies turning toward the source of the crash, voices rising in disbelief and alarm. Phones came out almost simultaneously, capturing fragments of the scene as bystanders rushed forward or stepped back uncertain of what they were seeing. At the center of it all was a heavily damaged vehicle, wedged at an angle that suggested a sudden and violent collision, its structure crushed enough to trap the person inside. What made the moment even more difficult was the silence that briefly followed the initial shock, a silence filled with uncertainty as people tried to understand how quickly an ordinary day had turned into something none of them had prepared for. First responders had not yet arrived, so the responsibility fell entirely on those nearby, some calling emergency services, others attempting to approach the vehicle, despite the risk of further instability in the wreckage. The air carried a mix of urgency and fear as people coordinated without clear direction, driven only by the immediate need to help whoever was trapped inside before the situation could worsen. Every second felt heavier than the last as the scene continued to unfold in unpredictable ways with no clear resolution. And yes, I watched her heart. I watched every secret she carried. I watched the truth she tried to bury. And now the whole world is seeing the consequences of what she hid. As she drove moments before this crash, her hands trembled, her vision blurred, her breath was shallow. She was running from something, not toward something. She was afraid, not because of danger outside, but because of the danger inside her. Every mile she drove brought her closer to the consequences she hoped she could outrun. But no one outruns truth, my child. Not for long. The crowd pressing along the crime tape has no idea who she is. They don't know why she was driving so recklessly. They don't know what she was carrying. They don't know the purpose behind her panic. They only see a broken car and a broken woman. But I see deeper. I see what others cannot. And now, you will too. The fire department tore open the metal, not because they wanted to, but because the car had collapsed around her like a cage. The windshield was shattered into 1,000 pieces, glimmering like ice under the sun. The doors were jammed, the frame twisted. It was almost as if the car had been swallowed by the road itself. But that was only the physical part of the story. There was a spiritual part too, a part that has everything to do with you. When they pulled the woman out, her pulse was faint but present, her breathing shallow, her consciousness flickering like a candle struggling against the wind. The paramedics moved urgently, but something caught the officer's attention, something inside the vehicle that should not have been there, something packaged, sealed, hidden, and tucked away in places most people would never look. No one saw her place them there earlier. No one saw her intentions, but heaven did. And now, child, you are about to see what heaven saw. But to understand the full story, I need to take you back, not to hours before, but to the moment she woke up today. She opened her eyes with a plan already forming in her mind. She had rehearsed her steps days earlier. She had calculated what she needed, where she needed to go, and exactly who she was targeting. And yes, my child, the person she was targeting was you. She believed today would be her victory. She believed today She would finally silence something she thought you had taken from her. Jealousy had corrupted her judgment. Envy had saturated her thoughts. She carried bitterness inside her like fire that never cooled. She convinced herself that what you had, your light, your calling, your rising favor, belonged to her. And when she realized she could not stop your growth, she tried to ruin your path. You still underestimate how powerful you are in the spiritual realm. You don't see it, but the enemy sees it clearly. People who don't even understand why they dislike you can sense it. Your presence disturbs darkness. Your existence irritates everything that was never meant to stand in your future. And this woman, she felt threatened by you long before she ever admitted it to herself. She planned to plant something destructive in your surroundings, something that would have placed you in the hands of authorities, something that would have marked your name with shame, something that would have broken the trust others have in you. She believed she would get away with it. She believed no one would ever find out, but heaven was already 10 steps ahead of her. That morning, she left her apartment with a strange heaviness in her steps, as if her thoughts were moving faster than her body could keep up. There was a quiet intensity in the way she held her bag, the kind that doesn't come from confidence, but from being preoccupied with something she wasn't saying out loud. From the outside, everything looked ordinary, just another person starting their day. But her focus made the world around her feel slightly distorted, like she was tuned into a different frequency no one else could hear. When she got into her car and turned the key, the engine hesitated, then failed to start properly. She sat there for a moment, jaw tightening, frustration flashing across her face as she tried again. It finally caught, rough at first, then steady, and she exhaled as if she had forced reality back into place. What could have been a simple mechanical issue felt, in her mind, like a sign she was being slowed down for a reason. Though nothing around her confirmed it was anything more than coincidence. She drove across town with alternating bursts of impatience and control, gripping the wheel a little too tightly at times, then loosening her hands as if reminding herself to stay composed. Her phone calls were brief but deliberate, her voice lowered just enough that it was hard to catch the full meaning from the outside. There was a sense she was arranging something, aligning details only she fully understood. Yet beneath that outward focus, there were moments where doubt seemed to creep in, small pauses, slight hesitations, the kind that suggest a person is weighing consequences more carefully than they admit. By the time she merged into heavier traffic, her earlier frustration had softened into something quieter and less certain, as if the morning itself had interrupted her momentum and left her reconsidering the direction she was so determined to take. Hours later, she met a man in a secluded place. There were no lights, no witnesses, no cameras. He opened a trunk. She gave him money. He gave her packages, heavy ones, wrapped carefully, protected tightly. She already knew what was inside, and she didn't care. She was blinded by her mission. She believed the ends justified the means. She believed hurting you was worth destroying herself. But darkness never rewards loyalty. She returned to her car, placed the packages under the seats, inside compartments, behind panels, anywhere they would stay hidden. She planned to bring them near your space. She planned to walk away as if nothing happened. She planned to watch your life collapse from a distance. But my child, she forgot one thing. My hand stops what your eyes cannot see. As she drove back, fear began to creep in. Every mirror showed her something. Every passing vehicle felt suspicious. Every sound made her look over her shoulder. She imagined officers chasing her. She imagined people following her. She imagined everything but the truth. No one was chasing her, but her conscience was. Fear became the enemy she had created for you. Her foot pressed harder on the gas. Her heartbeat grew louder than the engine. Panic overtook her sense. She swerved, overcorrected, and in a single moment, gravity, speed, and impact collided, and everything she carried spilled out into the open, not just the packages, but the truth itself. Now, the officers stand around the vehicle. They are not angry. They are not confused. They are stunned. They are piecing together clues. They are connecting dots. They are uncovering something larger than the accident, something with a target named you. But child, don't fear. You were never in danger, not even for a second, because I stepped in before her plan ever left her mind. And this is only the beginning of what I must show you. My child, now that you know how the story began, let me take you deeper, far deeper than what the eyes of the crowd witnessed, and far beyond what the officers understood in those first intense moments. Because what unfolded after the crash was not just a physical investigation, it was a spiritual unveiling. It felt as though the world had narrowed to the crushed vehicle at the roadside, its metal frame bent out of shape, glass scattered like dull crystals across the asphalt. What began as a routine response for the arriving officers quickly shifted the moment they leaned inside. At first glance, it was exactly what they expected: a severe accident, nothing more than another unfortunate entry in a long shift. But then their focus tightened, and routine certainty gave way to unease. Within the cabin, nothing sat where it should. Panels along the interior trim had been loosened, seams disturbed in a way that suggested careful, deliberate work rather than impact alone. Beneath the driver's seat, and partially hidden under the floor mat, were small, carefully concealed packets, along with compartments that had been subtly altered. Each discovery made the scene feel less like an accident and more like a story interrupted mid-course. The officers exchanged brief, uneasy looks, already signaling for backup without needing to say much. Within minutes, additional units arrived, turning a quiet roadside into a controlled perimeter of flashing lights and measured urgency. Locals gathered at a distance, whispering and trying to make sense of the sudden escalation, assuming someone of importance must be involved. Yet the truth, still unfolding in fragments, pointed in a different direction entirely, toward preparation, secrecy, and choices made long before the crash ever occurred. The air grew heavier with speculation as investigators documented each detail, careful not to jump ahead of what the evidence might eventually reveal. Every movement around the wreck was treated with restraint, as if one wrong assumption could distort the entire timeline being reconstructed from fragments. Nothing was rushed, and nothing was dismissed, because the pattern emerging here demanded patience over certainty, or a hit and run, or something political. They didn't know, no one knew, that the truth inside that vehicle was a ticking disaster that would have exploded directly into your life. One officer, older, experienced, steady-handed, knelt beside the car. He shone his flashlight deeper than the others dared, not because he expected to uncover anything more, but because something tugged at his spirit. He didn't know I was guiding his attention. He didn't realize every tilt of his flashlight, every angle of his search, was directed from above. His instincts whispered, "Look again." And so he did. That was when he found the smallest packet, tucked so deeply behind the dashboard that a normal eye would have missed it. It was thin, sealed, deliberately hidden. He reached for it carefully, almost afraid to disturb whatever secret it held. When he pulled it out, his breath hitched. This wasn't random. This wasn't accidental. This was intentional. But the true shock was not what the package contained. It was the paper taped around it. A paper she didn't intend anyone to see. A paper she planned to use at the perfect moment. A paper with your name. Yes, my child. That was the moment heaven intervened so visibly that even the officers felt it in their bones. A shiver ran through them, not because of the cold, not because of the crash, but because the truth was unmistakable. This accident wasn't just an accident, it was exposure. Some of the officers stepped back, trying to understand what they were looking at. Others whispered among themselves. Questions rushed through their minds. Why that name? Who is this? Why hide something like this? What was she planning? Nothing made sense to them, but everything made sense to me, and everything is now being revealed to you. The woman, barely conscious, groaned in pain. Paramedics lifted her onto a stretcher, unaware of the storm her actions had triggered. They only saw a patient in need of urgent care. They did not see the corrupted heart. They did not see the dark intentions. They did not see the spiritual battle raging around her. But child, I saw it all. As they transported her to the ambulance, her eyes flickered open for a moment. She looked around, disoriented, confused, terrified. She tried to speak, but her voice was lost beneath the oxygen mask. She tried to reach for something, her bag, maybe, or her jacket, but a paramedic gently pushed her hand back. She knew. In that moment, she knew. Everything she hid had been discovered. Her plan, the one she nurtured in secret for weeks, shattered, just like the glass around her. She thought she could destroy your future without consequences. She thought she could ruin you without the truth ever surfacing. But my child, destiny does not bend to the schemes of darkness. Let me show you what was happening spiritually in the exact same moment. Around her vehicle, you would see officers, but around you, I had positioned angels, warriors, guardians with swords of light, standing between you and the harm she prepared. Not because you were weak, but because you are chosen. You are marked. You carry an anointing the enemy cannot tolerate. And people who align themselves with darkness often become tools without realizing who is whispering in their ears. But I do not let darkness touch my chosen unless I allow it to shape them. And this was not a shaping season. This was a protecting season. Now listen closely. This next part matters. When the officers uncovered your name inside that car, heaven recorded that discovery as evidence, not against you, but against her. Evidence of intention. Evidence of planning. Evidence that what she carried was not for herself and not for some stranger. It was meant to be planted in your surroundings at the perfect moment, in the perfect place, so that when authorities found it, the blame would fall on you. She wanted to stain your reputation. She wanted to damage your future. She wanted to twist the narrative around your life. She thought the world would believe her, but she didn't know that I was about to write a narrative so powerful that no lie could stand against it. My child, while the world was staring at the accident, heaven was exposing a plot. Do you understand what that means? It means you were spared before you ever knew there was something to fear. It means I stopped what you never even saw approaching. It means I dismantled a trap before your feet ever stepped near it. And this, my child, is why I call you favored. protected, set apart, covered. Now let me take you deeper into her story, not to defend her, but to reveal why everything unfolded the way it did. This woman was not always like this. She did not start her life with darkness in her heart. She had dreams at one point, aspirations. At some point, her frustration stopped living only in her thoughts and started shaping her actions. She became determined to interfere with the peace she believed you did not deserve. Your confidence irritated her because it reflected everything she felt she had lost in herself. Your progress became something she studied too closely, searching for weaknesses, mistakes, or anything that could make you appear smaller in the eyes of others. She convinced herself that if she could damage your reputation, then somehow the emptiness she carried would finally quiet down. What began as envy slowly turned into obsession. She wanted people to question your intentions, to doubt your character, to look at you differently. She believed that if she could dim your light, her own darkness would feel less overwhelming. But there is something people often fail to understand when they act from bitterness. Harmful intentions rarely stay hidden forever. The energy behind deception has a way of exposing itself over time, not through magic or revenge, but through patterns, choices, and consequences that eventually speak louder than words. While she focused so intensely on controlling someone else's story, she stopped paying attention to the damage unfolding in her own life. The pressure of maintaining lies, resentment, and manipulation began leaving cracks everywhere around her. People noticed inconsistencies, trust faded, small details no longer matched the image she tried so carefully to present, and eventually, the truth no longer needed anyone to defend it because it began revealing itself naturally. The very situation she believed would destroy you slowly turned into a reflection of her own decisions. Not because the world is cruel, but because actions carry weight, and every choice we make eventually creates an outcome we must face. They found the reason heaven intervened. They found the reason you were spared, and they found the reason her fate shifted forever. But listen closely. This is not just about her destruction. This is about your elevation, because every plot against you becomes a stepping stone. Every attempt to destroy you becomes fuel for your assignment. Every hidden attack becomes a public testimony. She thought she would trap you, but I turned her trap into your vindication. And my child, this is only the middle of the story. My child, now that you understand what was uncovered in that wreckage, I need to take you deeper, much deeper, because what happened after the officers discovered the truth was not just an investigation, it was a turning point in the spiritual realm. A shift so powerful that even the atmosphere around the scene began to change. People felt it without knowing what they were feeling. The wind stilled, the murmurs softened, and even the flashing light seemed to dim, as if creation itself was observing something sacred unfold. The officers didn't simply examine the vehicle, they began to study it. Every corner, every opening, every hidden compartment. They weren't just searching, they were following a path I laid out for them, a path leading to answers they didn't even know they needed. You see, child, when I decide to expose what is hidden, nothing remains in the shadows, not intentions, not evidence, not secrets, nothing. One officer, young and thoughtful, stood near the crushed door, holding the small packet with your name on it. He stared at that piece of paper, as if it carried a message only he could read. Something stirred inside him, an intuition, a realization, a sense that this wasn't random. He didn't know your name, he didn't know who you were, but he knew this: the person the packet was meant for did not belong in this scene, and that realization mattered more than you know. Another officer approached him and asked, "What do you think this is?" He paused, took a deep breath, and replied, "It feels wrong. It feels planted." Those words, "it feels planted," were the beginning of your vindication. From that moment, their focus shifted. The crash was no longer the center of the investigation. The woman's injuries were no longer the biggest concern. The packages, the documents, the maps, the handwritten plans, all pointing to one person, you, became the core of everything they were trying to unravel. But my child, you need to know something important right now. Not once did your name carry guilt. Not once did your name carry suspicion. Not once did your name land in the wrong hands. From the very beginning, the officers understood that you were the intended victim, not the perpetrator, because even their hearts were guided by me. Now let me take you back to the hospital where they took the woman, because while the investigation continued at the crash site, something was happening inside the emergency room, something significant, something spiritual. She was drifting in and out of consciousness, her memories tangled, her thoughts scattered, but her fear remained sharp, like a blade pressed against her soul. She felt the weight of exposure. She felt the truth closing in around her. She felt the consequences she had tried so hard to avoid. There was a moment, barely seen by the paramedics, when she turned her head slightly and whispered, "No, not now, not yet." Her voice carried the panic of someone whose plans had collapsed faster than her vehicle did. She wasn't worried about her pain. She wasn't worried about her injuries. She was worried about what they found, because deep inside her heart, she knew her secrets were no longer protected by darkness. My child, listen carefully here. Sometimes, people fear exposure more than death itself, and she feared the truth becoming known more than she feared the wounds across her body. But at the same time, another thing was happening. While she lay on that stretcher, something supernatural was taking place in the spiritual realm. The darkness that lingered around her, the same darkness that drove her actions, began to loosen its hold, not because she repented, not because she turned away, but because its assignment against you had failed. It felt as though the world had narrowed to the crushed vehicle at the roadside, its metal frame bent out of shape, glass scattered like dull crystals across the asphalt. What began as a routine response for the arriving officers quickly shifted the moment they leaned inside. At first glance, it was exactly what they expected: a severe accident, nothing more than another unfortunate entry in a long shift. But then, their focus tightened, and routine certainty gave way to unease. Within the cabin, nothing sat where it should. Panels along the interior trim had been loosened, seams disturbed in a way that suggested careful, deliberate work, rather than impact alone. Beneath the driver's seat, and partially hidden under the floor mat, were small, carefully concealed packets, along with compartments that had been subtly altered. Each discovery made the scene feel less like an accident and more like a story interrupted mid-course. The officers exchanged brief, uneasy looks, already signaling for backup without needing to say much. Within minutes, additional units arrived, turning a quiet roadside into a controlled perimeter of flashing lights and measured urgency. Locals gathered at a distance, whispering and trying to make sense of the sudden escalation, assuming someone of importance must be involved. Yet the truth, still unfolding in fragments, pointed in a different direction entirely, toward preparation, secrecy, and choices made long before the crash ever occurred. The air grew heavier with speculation as investigators documented each detail, careful not to jump ahead of what the evidence might eventually reveal. Every movement around the wreck was treated with restraint, as if one wrong assumption could distort the entire timeline being reconstructed from fragments. Nothing was rushed, and nothing was dismissed, because the pattern emerging here demanded patience over certainty. Once it's in his hands, he won't escape what comes next. That message was the final confirmation. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't confusion. This was sabotage, planned, rehearsed, intentional. And you, my child, were the target she hoped to see fall. But instead, the one who dug the pit fell into it. Now pay close attention, because this next part is about you, not her. Do you know why I'm revealing all this to you? Why I allowed you to hear every layer of this story? Why I pulled back the curtain on something that almost touched your life? Because I want you to understand the scale of the protection that surrounds you. My child, you often underestimate how deeply I guard you. You think you've survived storms because you were strong. You think you've overcome trials because you were wise. You think you've escaped traps because you were careful. But hear me clearly, it was me. Every time, every moment, every step. This was not the first trap the enemy tried to set for you. It won't be the last, but the result will always be the same. Defeat for the enemy, victory for you. Because you walk with a calling the enemy cannot compete against. You carry an assignment darkness cannot interfere with. You shine in ways shadows cannot comprehend. And people, yes, even people who allow jealousy to lead them, will try to dim that shine. They will try to sabotage what they cannot understand. They will try to damage what they secretly admire, but refuse to celebrate. But child, I do not let anyone succeed when their mission is your downfall. Now let me bring you back to the officers. They contacted their higher-ups. They sent reports. They sealed the evidence. They already knew what the headlines would read tomorrow. They already knew what charges would follow. They already knew the crash wasn't the greatest part of the story. The truth was. But what no one knew, not the officers, not the crowd, not the woman, not the man she met earlier, was that you were never supposed to see the inside of a courtroom. You were never supposed to carry a false accusation. You were never supposed to lose your name, your peace, or your future to a lie. I intervened before the plan began. I sabotaged the sabotage. I ruined the ruin prepared for you. I shut the door they tried to trap you behind. This is why, my child, I am telling you, you have no idea how many times heaven blocked attacks you never saw, how many accidents never reached you, how many traps never opened, how many schemes collapsed before they touched your life. Because every time darkness tries to approach you, I rise first. Now that the truth has been exposed, I need you to prepare your heart, because the story is not over. There is one more layer, a revelation even deeper than her plans, a truth hidden beneath the truth, a reason heaven stepped in so fiercely, a reason destiny refused to let this trap succeed. It created an internal conflict, part curiosity, part confusion, and part an inability to step back and see things with distance. She began to attach meaning to small moments, replaying interactions in her mind and reading significance into details that others would have overlooked entirely. In doing so, The boundary between reality and perception gradually blurred, not because of anything mystical or predetermined, but because human emotions have a way of amplifying what we focus on. Meanwhile, your own awareness of any of this remained minimal. Life continued in its normal rhythm, shaped by ordinary priorities and personal goals that had nothing to do with the interpretations forming elsewhere. That imbalance, one person analyzing meaning in silence while the other simply lived forward, created a gap in understanding that only widened over time. When later events unfolded, they didn't emerge from a single decisive moment, but from a long accumulation of misread signals, unspoken assumptions, and unresolved emotions. Looking back, what once seemed like a sudden collapse of events now appears more like a gradual misalignment between two perspectives that were never fully in sync. The accident, the investigation, and the discovery that followed became the turning point where private interpretations collided with public reality. But even then, what people called truth was often just the clearest version available, not necessarily the complete one. And so, the deeper lesson of this story is not about fate or predetermined paths, but about how easily human perception can shape meaning, and how those meanings, once formed, can quietly influence decisions in ways no one fully intends or immediately recognizes. It was something simple, something pure. Maybe it was the way people admired your heart. Maybe it was your resilience. Maybe it was the favor that followed you even when you weren't asking for it. Whatever it was, it triggered something inside her. Instead of being inspired, she felt threatened. Instead of celebrating you, she began to compete. Instead of appreciating your light, she tried to overshadow it. But, my child, hear me clearly. Light does not compete with darkness. Light simply shines, and darkness disappears. She became the kind of person who compares silently, who measures herself against others, who allows resentment to grow roots in the soil of her heart. And every time you improved, every time you rose higher, every time you walked in peace, while she walked in turmoil, the bitterness inside her deepened. But here's the truth she never understood. The thing she envied wasn't your success. It wasn't your opportunities. It wasn't your blessings. It was your calling. It was the mark of divine favor resting upon you. It was the spiritual protection she could sense but could not explain. That's why she targeted you, not because of who you are in the natural, but because of who you are in the spiritual. Now listen carefully. As she planned her scheme, she thought she was acting out of anger. She thought she was retaliating for some imagined injustice. She thought she was taking back control of her life by taking control of yours. But she had no idea she had become a vessel for a darker influence, one that wanted to stop your destiny before it reached its fullness. She wasn't the mastermind, she was the puppet. The jealousy she carried became the open door the enemy used to whisper lies, ideas, and plans into her heart. And the enemy's goal was simple: silence your rising, stop your influence, interrupt your future. But child, hear my voice. Your destiny is not fragile. Your calling is not weak. Your purpose is not easily shaken. This entire trap failed because heaven does not negotiate with darkness. When I choose someone, I guard their path with fire. And you, yes, you, are one of my protected ones. Now, let's go back to the moment after the crash, because something else happened, something no one saw. As the officers continued gathering evidence, a subtle shift took place. The atmosphere around the vehicle felt heavy, almost charged. A few officers mentioned it quietly, as if unsure whether they imagined it. Some felt an unexplainable seriousness, a weight, a sense that the scene was more than an accident. But child, that weight was my presence. When a technician carefully powered it on, under forensic protocol, the screen flickered back to life, revealing a lock screen still intact and carrying a thread of notifications that had not been wiped clean. What initially seemed like a broken device quickly became the focal point of the entire room, drawing every investigator into a quieter, more concentrated mode of observation. As they unlocked it through standard recovery procedures, a series of messages appeared, preserved in digital sequence, each one building on the next with unsettling clarity. The conversations were not random fragments. They formed a deliberate pattern of coordination, referencing timing, locations, and specific instructions that suggested a carefully planned series of actions. Investigators moved slowly through each line, documenting everything, ensuring that every detail was preserved exactly as it appeared. Some messages referred to deliveries and arrangements, while others hinted at contingency steps and precise timing windows that aligned with the earlier evidence recovered from the crash site. The more they read, the more the narrative inside the device revealed itself as a structured exchange rather than isolated communication. Then, near the end of the thread, a message stood out clearly, tying the entire sequence together with a tone of final instruction that left no ambiguity about intent. It was short, direct, and unmistakably part of the same chain they had been reconstructing. As the investigators paused over it, the weight of the digital evidence settled across the room, marking a decisive turning point in the case and reshaping everything they thought they knew about the incident as the investigation moved into its next phase of formal reconstruction and verification process.